practice, not just in the mental health system, but at all levels of government as well. So the GAP actually has a series of clinical and research and social and policy priorities, and I'm only going to go through the clinical and the social and policy priorities, partly because you might glaze over at some of the research priorities, which are very important to underpin this, but I now emphasise the clinical and social priorities at the moment. So the clinical priorities that I think hopefully will flow from what I've just presented to you are that early intervention should be a routine part of clinical practice, and it should be a normal part of child and youth mental health. That promising evidence-based interventions which have been developed should be disseminated, and there should be training of professionals in these treatment approaches, and this should be prioritised, that it should be part of the curriculum in training programs. And that on the basis of current evidence, that indicated prevention represents the best starting place for prevention of borderline personality disorder. And that knowledge about BPD and its precursor signs and symptoms should be disseminated among child and youth mental health professionals, among trainees, and that workforce development strategies should address clinician-centred discomfort with the label and mistaken beliefs and prejudicial and discriminatory attitudes and behaviour. So that we should be arguing for the workforce to change in line with the evidence. One of the key aim of GAP is to encourage people not to delay the diagnosis of BPD and to acknowledge that non-diagnosis is discriminatory. That actually, the problem is not the label, the problem is non-diagnosis. And that people shouldn't use misleading terms or substitute diagnoses for BPD, which is quite common in a number of mental health settings internationally. Particularly, obviously, the bipolar one. We deliberately didn't mention the bipolar term because that was going to be a can of worms for people, but it's implied in this that bipolar should not be used as a substitute diagnosis. And I think, again, this is a key point, and Perry and Lynn will talk a bit more about this, that family and friends should be actively involved in prevention and early intervention as both collaborators and as the architects of systems of care, and that they shouldn't be demonised and alienated from treatment early on in the treatment process. That this is something that can be avoided. The kinds of stories that no doubt you'll hear about alienation from the clinicians and from the health system can be prevented. And then we have a number of social and policy priorities. First of all, that BPD needs to be recognised as a severe mental disorder at all levels of the health system. That includes in the global burden of disease. And in my conversations with the global burden of disease people, the bar has been raised substantially now about how to get into the global burden of disease. And we have a real kind of catch-22 challenge on our hands because there has to be an evidence base to support its inclusion, but of course until it's included we're not going to have an evidence base. And they now have very elaborate committees that have been set up to vet all these special interest groups who want their disorder included in the global burden of disease. So we've kind of missed the early opportunity to be included, and it's going to be a real challenge. And if it's not measured, it's not going to get included. I think there's an old saying from one of those business management people, I think it's that guy Drucker, you know, what gets measured gets managed. And BPD is not measured in most of these global surveys. And that's to the severe detriment of people and their families who have the disorder. We also need evidence-based policy to address BPD from primary through to specialist care. We can't just focus on the specialist psychotherapies, and we need to build a health system response to prevention and early intervention for BPD with young people and those who care for them at its focus. That we need to build a system that suits the young people and their families, not squeeze young people and their families into an ill-suited system of care. And I think that's a major policy challenge in many ways. And then finally, we need to eliminate discriminatory practices in healthcare systems as a priority. That the idea that BPD should be a diagnosis of exclusion should be seen as untenable in this day and age. So I'm going to let Fleur have the last word.